thank you, everybody. Really appreciate you spending some time with me today, especially right before our lunch break. For those of you who are in person, again, thank you for all those who showed up online. So I'll be talking about unleashing business agility with API-led integration. So going beyond, if you come to some of the other IBM sessions at this conference, we've been talking a lot about API lifecycle and management. And this is really going beyond that to think about, all right, now that I want to expose APIs, how do I go in and tap all those different business data sources that I have inside my organization to expose them up as APIs and do it in a way that really meets at scale. So we can look at some of the challenges that we've seen in the marketplace over the last few years. In the last, we had 1 year where we really did 10 years of digitization projects in that single year. The one stat that I really like is when looking at IDCs, finding that 80% of organizations have over 1,000 different applications in their portfolio today. And I look at it as, all right, we want to make sure that all of those different applications can be accessed as APIs. We want to surface those applications up, but also really not surface the applications, but surface the business value that's inside those applications. But how do we do that at scale? How do we leverage that so that way we can connect to all these different data sources, but not have the constructs of those backend applications, the idiosyncrasies of them leak into the API? So how can we provide that nice loose coupling to provide that digital slinky? But at the same time, we want to integrate with all of those things over APIs. But we've introduced a new challenge of attrition skill gap, where as part of a pandemic record, we had 4.3 million people quit in August. It increased to 4.5 in November. So organizations, for the most part, that I go and talk to are saying, we're trying to do a lot more. The business is requiring us to deliver more assets, deliver more functionality, have greater agility, but with less people. And often the people that we have are more general purposed. So it's not that I have a core skill set group of just integration technical specialists that we might have had 10 or 15 years ago during the SOA days, where now I'm saying I've got a bunch of application developers, I've got a bunch of service developers, mobile developers that are all trying to build APIs, trying to access data, trying to leverage all the different components of your business. Again, that 1,000 different application sources that you might have, some internal, a good chunk of them legacy, a good chunk of them in the cloud, but doing it in a way that's consistent, that provides a uniform way of accessing them. So we really looked at these disruptive trends and gone, all right, how can we apply what IBM's done from an automation and integration perspective to act as a force multiplier for the workforce? Because at the end of the day, it's going to be the people that are going to be delivering these solutions, leveraging proper tools and technology to deliver business value. So we've really looked at how can we leverage AI, and if you attended our session earlier today that was given, we talked about leveraging AI for test automation and for workflow design, but how can we do that to, again, enrich the ability for a single person to deliver more technical assets? How can we deliver and integrate and orchestrate more of our workflows and applications? And again, a lot of that is exposing those capabilities up into APIs that then we can manage and really make a composable business model. And I won't be spending as much time talking about this last section, but it really is important about having that continual observability of the system to really understand as I have more systems that are dynamic, as I'm building new systems, deploying them out, I'm tearing down other systems, especially in a containerized landscape, how can I make sure that the functionality that I'm exposing for business use is still available and accessible? So from an IBM perspective, we see that that you don't have automation without integration, because at the end of the day, I want to be able to compose all of these different assets together. And again, these different assets could be part of your business that are exposed via services that IBM provides, being services provided by other vendors, again, both legacy applications, new applications that you're putting in your environments, SaaS-provided systems. But at the same time, I want to compose all of these together. But each one of these is going to have different interfaces. The way they describe the data, the way they interact with their data, again, their business value that you're trying to untap is going to be different. Some are going to do it in a REST model. Some are going to do it in possibly a legacy SOAP model, or even mainframe CMS type systems. So we're going to have to be able to tap into all of those and expose them into a friendly way for our developers. Because at the end of the day, in my mind, when I'm looking at building high-quality APIs, it's not just about making it easy for the provider to push them up, but making it so it's delightful for the user to consume them. So if I can make all of my business services accessible, whether again maybe it's a REST API for certain types of services, maybe I have a big query system, so I want to leverage Graph. Maybe I'm looking at more an event-driven architecture, so I want async APIs to be able to leverage. I should be able to do that all through a common API management platform. So from our perspective, all of those different types of APIs fall into that same category. And I want to pull those all together. Now, again, this is around integration being led by APIs. There are some characteristics that definitely come inbound that have slowed down that classic model of doing integration. And this could be integration from your more legacy ESB style, as well as just building things in code using different integration frameworks and SDKs. The integration library, the amount of code, the technical assets that we have to tie all these different business components together have become really large and really bloated. And especially when I've embedded them in the same construct of my business application, now suddenly I might have to be going in and changing integration code, even though there's no change to my business logic, and I'm having to go through the whole testing process, the whole lifecycle process, and validation. Again, from a specialist-only dependency, we're not seeing that same investment in having true deep integration skill sets. We have a broader scope of people investing both from their own skills as well as companies hiring in having more general purpose developers. Now, we might still have specializations, as we talked about on the first day, of having people that say, I'm a general purpose developer, but I have specializations in API development or API product management. But we're not seeing the people that are saying, oh, I am a deep down integration wire level developer. And of course, then there's the common, especially when we're building out those really large integration frameworks, a lack of reuse and interoperability, especially over time. So often, when I go and talk with customers and we say, okay, the old model of doing integration is a challenge. What can we do to really make things better? They go, well, let's do it with APIs. That's it's the trend word, and it has been for quite some time. And when we look at from an API definition, application programming interfaces, we tend to focus on two main things: that it should simplify our software development, and it should be easy to do and secure. And often, when customers look at that and go, oh, that's my goal, that's the target, so they think doing APIs then is simple and easy. And I want to kind of start looking at maybe demystifying that a bit before we get into, okay, how can we back up out of this? So how hard can building an API be? I mean, most of us in this room have probably either built an API or worked with APIs. I fire up my editor, I read the API standards docs. Okay, am I doing Open API specification v2, v3? Oh, there's some big differences there. Which one do I need to do? Oh, do I actually want some features now that are part of OAS 3.1? Oh, okay, maybe we're not ready there for yet. No, and then what about best practices? Because the guides don't necessarily tell me what's the best way of building APIs. So I'll go and do a nice Google search and come up with 1,000 different articles with 1,000 different opinions on what's the best way of building APIs. And that's just the contract. Suddenly we get into, okay, how do I best define API security and rate limiting? How do I deliver example code and deal with the connectivity to all my backend systems that I want to integrate with? Because I'm integrating with backend systems that might be in different formats that I need to deal with semantic mapping or data mapping. I have to figure out how I'm going to do all the different deployments. Again, on and on and on, to where suddenly we go, okay, this idea of exposing all these applications as integration to APIs can get challenging. So maybe I don't want to go and just start rolling this myself in code. Maybe I don't want to go and start leveraging just off-the-shelf libraries or try to go and look at a vendor's documentation of their APIs and try to decipher how do I interact with that, because they have 50 different APIs just to gain access to their systems, but I only really care about one or two of those to go get or request for information. So how can we get back to that promise, that hope, or maybe hopeful goal of simplifying easy to then, of course, accelerate our business? So what do I really need if it's just an API? So we're going to take a really simple example. And I know we just had a talk on HL7, which again gets really deep into the business domain models. We could go into the insurance or banking spaces and talk about different data models there as well. But I wanted to take just the simplest of models of lead generation. Because if it's complex at a simple model, then it's only a compounding problem as we start introducing industry specifications, as we start introducing different compliance, external standards to the mix. So if we start saying, okay, I just want to create a new API that registers leads. That's the business goal. Again, as we develop new APIs, especially these integration APIs, they should come back to what is the business trying to deliver. So it shouldn't be the technology team said, I'm going to take this back-end database and just slap some APIs on it and call it done. So if I start there, I say, okay, I have a few fields that I want to collect, first name, last name. There's probably a few other fields that are going to grow over time, based on my MVP or my different consumer users. I'm going to follow some good API practices as part of that. So I'm going to need an ID as part of it, or some sort of primary key to register that value. I don't just want to create new users. I want to also, as part of my interaction model, maybe I'm building a mobile app or a web app and multiple different consumers. I want to be able to do the create, the retrieve, the update. Then I need to actually connect this API contract to our back-end enterprise lead management system. But I don't want to necessarily have it where I'm going to just use their model and expose it right up to the front, because I want to be able to have that idea, at least that hope goal, that maybe one day I might need to change my lead management system, and I don't want to have to go back and rewrite all the calling applications that are going to be integrated with it. So first things first, I got to test connectivity. Each of these backend systems might do something different. One might require SAML security, one might do JWT, one might do basic auth, one might need mutual TLS. The way they do their handshakes, and that's all assuming that's HTTP based and not some other protocol. And then once we get into the system and deal with the connectivity and making sure we're managing that connection, because we've got to hold that open as part of the API service that I'm dealing with, the fields that I decided to call it that made sense for my business might be different than the systems that my lead management system uses. But I don't want to expose those. That to me is a leakage problem. I don't want to inject their model of the world into what I want my consumers to see of the world. So, and they might also have lots of fields that are mandatory that need default values that I don't actually want to expose the outside world. I can expose just the fields that I want to make it so for my users to consume the service and hide some of the complexity that the lead management system has behind the scenes. So I can start doing that. Then there's also the challenge of data formats. I might have a phone number in one format and the lead system requires it in a different format. I might have first name, last name, where I need it to be last name, comma, first name. All the different types of data format permutations that if you've done a lot of integration work, you know that you can spend tons of time in data mapping. And data mapping is tricky. It's not necessarily an easy thing, and it takes a good amount of skill, especially if we're writing lots of code to do it and starting, pull apart the string and reassemble the string and validating and testing all the different regex patterns that I might be trying to implement. I also need to create test data, because eventually I got to be able to say, validate that, hey, this API works, it's working end to end, I can run through that system. And I also need to comply with all those open API standards that were part of the OAS 2, OAS 3, to make sure that if I hand that contract out to someone else, that it's just going to work. And again, as a developer, that I'm now trying to do this not just for one application. Remember, my organization has thousands of applications that we're trying to provide APIs and enrich them for. I need to be able to do this quickly. I need to be able to do this at speed. So I can't spend tons of time learning all those back-end systems. I need to leverage discovery. So obviously, at some point, I'm going to need to leverage security standards. I'm going to kind of move through this a little faster, rate limiting. Again, all the things that we normally think about as part of an API management platform. I need to do more testing to make sure that the security and the rate limiting is actually working beyond just the business logic of the back-end API. And I need to push that API out to be discoverable by my consumers, make sure they can do self-sign-up, so on and so forth. So it's all of these different components are something that we need to think about when we're going to say, well, let's just surface up all those business applications as APIs. So how can we streamline that process? Oh, wait a minute. I always forget about this. Because this always happens as part of the project, right? We get through, and if it's a waterfall project or agile project, we get through and someone says, oh, wait a minute. By the way, it needs to be highly scalable, because it's a requirement that they changed midway through the project, but they forgot to tell me as a developer. Oh, it should run in containers because we want it to be multi-cloud. Highly available, because gosh forbid the system ever goes down. Even if the backend system is not highly available, your APIs, they want it to be, so I don't just get a generic 500, but I get some business level response that comes back. And maybe another requirement is it can run cloud and on-prem now or in the future. Oh, and then there's a shopping list item that we didn't budget for. Those at least got budgeted. where can you write some CI/CD deployment scripts because we want to automate that all. We want to make sure that the gateway can be deployed separately from all the management layers. I want to make sure I can put that gateway for a consistent experience over in that other cloud location. Maybe I have a cloud in Azure, or a gateway in AWS, another gateway in GCP, another gateway on-prem. And I want to make sure that the user is hitting the gateway closest to the business service so they don't have to make lots of hops and still provide a unique, consistent experience. So I want to be able to do that. And I want to make sure that we can enable async and streaming APIs. So all these things, that shopping list comes around. So how can we make sure that we're doing this efficiently and effectively to deliver the functionality for the business? Because all this is just technical, right? I mean, if we go back to our previous slide, if it lets me go back a few, the majority of this is just technical glue, right? It's stuff that I need to do to expose out the goal of I want to have register new leads with as few fields as possible, and I want to provide, again, a wonderful user experience for my customers. So again, I want to get back to simple and easy. So how can we really do that? So IBM has spent a lot of time taking our different core capabilities and streamlining them all into an integrated authoring experience, where we can start and say, I want to go and discover what backend apps I have out there. I want to look at different smart connectors that handle all the different security, so I don't have to. I want those smart connectors to discover the fields that are available to me, the consumer of that backend service. Because my credentials, or the credentials that I'm using to connect to that service, might not have the same access as another set of credentials. So I want to make sure that the values, the fields that are in that backend system are actually what I can access. And then leveraging smart AI to help deal with the mapping, help deal with the testing. So we've delivered the ability to build APIs in minutes driven from those back-end systems, where I can say, all right, I want to start with a connection to Salesforce. I want to start with a connection to Workday. I want to start to a connection to SAP or DB2. And I want to start building my APIs based on a model that I define, map it to those back-end fields, and do it in a way that is enjoyable for the consumer of the API, but allows the API provider to do this at speed and scale, and provide all the different functionality without having to write any code. And I want to do it where I'm developing it using open API specifications. I'm implementing it using latest security standards of OAuth 2 and JWT and HTTPS just by default. That shouldn't be something that I have to think about, oh, yes, I need to go and add. If I want to add rate limiting, it's something that's just say, click, check, yes, let's have it in there. Having it where it's published out to a portal, having it subscribable, all the different versioning and lifecycle, all built in. So what I can do is start focusing again back on what is the business really trying to get. And again, in my example, it was a simple lead generation track, but maybe you're doing something that's far more complex. So from an insurance industry standpoint, maybe it's doing real-time insurance verification of your auto insurance from a driver's license perspective every time you drive through one of those iPass or SunGate or any of the token systems, where that's the goal. That's what we're trying to deliver from a business standpoint. So how can we rapidly expose that in a secure, controlled, scalable fashion? And that's where IBM's taken a lot of our technology that's all cloud native, all container-based, but can also be deployed completely behind your firewall, completely air-gapped, so we have that range of flexibility, and deliver the functionality there to, again, build these APIs that you want to have that are exposing the business data, so we can really tap into those existing assets. So it doesn't become an exercise of, oh, the business wants to expose that as an API. So then IT goes, well, it's going to be 6 to 12 weeks for us to maybe create an MVP to write the Java application, pull down new frameworks. We're going to have to spend tons of time digging through SDKs, digging through API libraries, trying to understand how this even works. Where again, we've built a lot of that connections into the system. So some of the levers that we've put in to really provide accelerators, and I'm only going to highlight a few of them, is one of them is around creating APIs using natural language processing. So this is one of the newest features we've added, where I can start saying, I want to go create an integration, saying, okay, I want to build a new integration where I'm opening a ticket from ServiceNow and identifying an issue, and we're going to start suggesting APIs, or suggesting integrations, I should say, from that natural language processing, where I'm pulling from multiple different data sources, because usually integrations, in my early example was just one. But for the most part, when we look at majority of organizations that are building API-led integrations, you're connecting multiple backend systems. You're doing lightweight mashups of data. Now you're doing it inside of a controlled context, so that way you don't end up with these really uncontrollable systems. But you're starting to pull those together to expose out. So we've done that to help speed up where can I go find my data. Building a first-in-class integration API with a no-code editor. So I can start saying, again, from our editor's point of view, oh, I want that first name. It's a string. Last name, string. Account number, I'm going to define it as a number. Reward balance, again, I might define that as a number. I might define it as something else. Again, this is from a rewards API. And then I can start defining what are the operations that I want to expose, where we suggest operations based on the model, suggest filters based on the model, and generate open API specification contracts based on this editor. So we're building those APIs following best practices. So if I want to do a replace or create API, we're going to use the correct HTTP verb based on that business syntax. So that way we're following best practices. Not everything becomes just a get or a post. We're going to really leverage the functionality and the design intent of our full REST model as part of that. And we can, again, tap into a catalog of hundreds of smart application connectors where I don't have to know the JSON model or the XML model or the whatever name payload model it is. I'm going to be able to see that in a drag and drop format. And I can take those contracts and pull them in, because again, it's open API specifications into either our API management layer, or we do understand that there's heterogeneous environments out here. We want to both work with our solutions, but also play nicely in the larger IT sandbox. So we can pull those native open API specifications, again, into our management layer and start building out our richer model schema building and integration debugging, where we can start saying, okay, I want to introduce a JWT validate as part of this process. And I want to have that consistency every time. And I'm going to do some additional mapping and filtering maybe. And then based on what operation, I'm going to set a simple operation switch. And I can do this all through a no-code editor if I want to, that allows me to quickly add additional functionality to the integration in front using the gateway. Now, from the integration standpoint, I mentioned a big part of any integration task is going to be mapping. And so I didn't mention this earlier, but I spent 6.5 years working in the insurance and financial area. I built over 300 integrations, a lot of XSLT, a lot of Java work, a lot of eSQL. And the majority of any project time was spent doing data mapping. Well, we've built in capabilities such as the AI transformation generator to take and build complex transformations from logic samples. So instead of saying, all right, I need to, how do I map, a simple low, low, normal, medium, high, high, urgent, high, kind of value switches, I can just provide samples. Or more complex, I can start providing source samples and target samples and let the AI figure out what's the right patterns to build to start saying, how am I going to map the source to the target? Without me having to write that logic, we're going to start generating those JSON-ida examples. And you can implement those into your integrations, rapidly speeding up the time it takes, or I should say reducing the time it takes to build out those high-quality integrations, which then allows you, the developer that's working on these assets, to go work on yet another integration or work on another part of your application that's leveraging these integrations. So that way you can also have good decoupling of your business code from the integration that you're trying to build. So we really do see that we want to put automation in every step of the process. And I've really focused here as part of the integration developer, which is at number 2, but we want to have a continuous feedback loop of having that enterprise architect be able to design, determine what connectors between which applications I want to have, what data assets are going to be reused. I want to have that common security and governance, so that way once I've defined a security policy, maybe coming down from my CISO, I can apply it in every single API and do it in a consistent fashion at runtime. I can hand that off to my integration developer, which might be an application developer, where this is kind of their part-time gig because I'm doing this all in a no-code environment. I didn't have to learn a complex tool suite to do this. And I can select from those reusable assets as well as create new assets to meet the business need, and then share those new assets back into the reusable catalog as needed. I can leverage different AI to accelerate my workload or my work, so that way I'm not having to spend so much time building these assets, both from the building process as well as the testing process. And of course, the better test coverage I can have, the higher quality that I'm going to put out as a product out the door, which means I'll spend less time debugging issues later on in the service lifecycle, whether it be as part of the upper environments or in production. And of course, then, as I alluded to earlier, even more in the integration operation side through visibility. So with that, I just would love if people would take some time to look at what we've done here with API management use cases and industry examples, as well as part of our integration platform. If you're interested in just the API Connect, which is our API management platform, you can try it on AWS, which is a new SaaS service. If you'd like to look at the whole end-to-end, the integration story that I was talking about here that leverages API Connect and App Connect working in tandem as part of that single user model design, you can try that as part of our free trial of Cloud Pak for integration. So with that, I'll throw it over to some questions if we've got.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dan. Do you have any questions in the audience? Yeah.
Thank you for the talk. It's very informative. I have a simple question because, a greenfield is very easy to build stuff on. And I see that you have lots of connectors for somebody who wants to do it right. How about that if some organization that already has quite a lot of API built already, but they're not built up to the standards that you talked about, can you import it into this environment and then build on top of that?
Most definitely. So I can take, along with all of those smart connectors, I can take existing APIs, whether they be REST contracts, it would be Open API specification based, or WSDL contracts. And I can take them in and use those as my connection endpoints, where I can still do all of that rich integration in front of those existing contracts if I want. And that way I can modernize them, uplift them without having to go into that existing IT asset that's already deployed and start modifying and changing it. Because again, I might not want to tear open that code. I might not have the developers that built that anymore, or the skills based on that code base to take on the risk of doing that to make those changes. So most definitely.
We have two questions online. The first one is do you support GraphQL?
We do support GraphQL, yes.
And the second one, do you support async APIs?
Do we support what?
Async API, asynchronous APIs with the.
So yes, we do support asynchronous APIs. From an IBM standpoint, we talk about as async APIs in the form right now of managed Kafka endpoints. We actually do put a gateway in front of that and provide gateway functionality between your actual Kafka brokers and your Kafka clients.
Okay, sounds good. So it's time for the lunch. So